What's up YouTube? Today we're making that forest style sound in Hive2. Let's dive in and have a look. So for those who haven't seen my in-depth Hive2 video, there's a couple of things in here that make this synth particularly special for creating the sound that I've kind of been going over throughout the last couple of videos. So I've got an instance of Hive2 here that I've just popped in. I'm just going to initialize it so that everything is set to default, and I'm going to pop in a MIDI over here. I think this is in the note, it's a long F key. I'm just going to duplicate it all the way along here. So essentially at the moment, there's nothing really happening with the sound. Let's just solo this. We've basically just got an initialized saw wave. And I kind of showed you guys two ways of creating the sound. Each one is slightly different. You know, either creating the sound using an actual oscillator, sine wave, or creating the sound using a filter which is being self-resonated. So I actually had a question in a previous video actually saying that self-resonating a filter is actually the same thing as using a sine wave, and it's not. They do sound slightly different. I believe it's due to the fact that, you know, as the filter rises, the frequency that comes out is brighter. There's, you know, more high frequencies, whereas a oscillator is kind of designed to be linear all the way across. Whereas a filter is designed not to be linear, it's designed to be pleasing to the ear, if that makes sense. You get a bit more of a kind of natural pleasing sound from a resonated filter, I've found, to my ear. But that being said, is using modulation and that kind of thing, you know, like I showed you in the Pigments video, you can get some very, very good sounds using an oscillator. The cool thing about this is the filter self-resonates very nicely. The oscillator can be quantized. In fact, any type of modulation can be quantized in Hive2. So we can self-resonate the filter and then quantize that modulation to a specific pitch. So for those who aren't following, I'm going to give you a quick sort of A-B of what I think the difference of the oscillator and a self-resonated filter, and we're going to look at quantizing both of them. So just to set things up, I'm going to bypass the filter for now. Actually going to turn it up an octave. So let's create a randomized melody using the sample and hold. So this is within the LFO. So as far as I know, you do have this random generator here within Hive, but this generates a random on every note trigger, as far as I know. Whereas the LFO, you've got two different types of random. You've either got random hold, or you've got random glide, which is kind of more, it's the difference between Serum's SNH on and SNH off, if that makes sense. So I prefer the kind of square shape. And one thing to note is I think the speed is actually double by default in this guy. So to get a 1/16 that we're used to in another synth, we're going to have to switch this to 1/8. And then let's just drag this over to the semitones and it'll default to the oscillator tune. Cool, so far so good. So now let's explore this quantize. Here we've got a bunch of different scales built in, and let's just go with a minor chord. I find a minor scale, it's like it gives you all the notes in the scale as opposed to just the kind of 3 which are most relevant, if that makes sense. So you get all the leading notes in between, which sounds a little bit too chaotic. So if we're going to quantize, I generally go with a minor chord. Cool. So let's look at the filter. So to get the filter to key track, we want to set it to exactly 70. Let me just get it back to 70. I had it now. Get it back to 70. And then let's just use this modulation here. We're going to use the same as our oscillator. And then just tune it up like that. And then we want to make sure the resonance is all the way up so that it creates a self-oscillation. And let's just quantize this modulation as well to the chord. So here, what we want to do is let's turn this to low pass 24. So we've actually engaged the filter. And now what we want to do is we want to turn this oscillator down. If this input is basically a gain, it doesn't go all the way to 0, whereas this goes all the way down to 0. So to get no audio coming through, we're going to turn the volume down here. So as you can hear, there's a pretty distinct difference between the oscillator and the filter. Like I mentioned, this one, it sounds more inaccurate but has musical tendencies, or it sounds more acoustically natural, if that's the way to put it. So here what I want to do is let's actually just set this to unipolar by clicking this button over here. So I just want to bypass the filter and engage the oscillator again so we can have a listen. We've also got more range on the modulation of the filter. So you can go into that like really, really high-pitched territory and the really low-pitched territory, where with the modulation or the tuning of the oscillator, you don't get quite that much control. Okay, so let's jump back to filter mode. Let's turn the oscillator down, turn low pass on. I actually just want to put on a reverb real quick, because this reverb sounds incredible. Boost it up quite a bit here. We actually want the filter to be at the key of the note that we're sending it on the MIDI. So we want to turn this key follow to 100%. And then if the cutoff is at 70%, it tracks perfectly to the key of the MIDI, as well as the quantizing of the modulation. So then we can jump and actually jump here and turn transpose the filter down. To get a nice, a wider range on that modulation. So another cool thing, I've showed you guys the scope before, but I want to use it to quickly show you guys how cool this function generator is. So instead of using the LFO to modulate the pitch, what I want to do is I want to use it to send to the function generator set the function generator to follow mode, and then send the envelope out to the modulation. So for the time being, let's just have a look at what's happening here. So I've basically duplicated it at the moment, but this allows us to kind of create envelope characteristics on those modulations. You know, much like in Pigments's sample and hold random, you've got that rise and fall. So what we can do is go to the LFO here and just switch this over to Funk 1 envelope. And another really cool trick is we can use the second random hold. Let's set this to something slow. Let's try 1/1 and set this to modulate these attack and decay times. So let's just set this up a bit, maybe set this to modulate upwards. Okay, it is bipolar. And then set this one to modulate downwards to get some pretty interesting results here. Let's see what happens. Okay, I'm just going to give us a beat to play alongside that. So another really, really cool trick is to, I actually just want to save this as like a number 1. Here what I want to do is, let's have a look at this shape generator here. Let's set this to 1/16 and draw in a couple of steps. Let's go with like 6. That's an interesting number that's not divisible by 4 or 8 or something like that. And then let's drag this shape over to the volume. Let's turn it down and then set the modulation to 100%. So what we've done now is we kind of created a Trance Gate kind of effect. And we can use each of these steps to kind of create a kind of gated pattern. So let's do 1 thin, 1 large, 2 thins, another large. And for those who don't know, you can actually mouse wheel. You hold the mouse down and you mouse wheel upwards to create multiple of these shapes. So you can kind of create a glitchy, a double step. another really cool trick, if you're going with these kind of like really random kind of sounds, is to add this corrode effect. It's kind of like a bit crusher. And then you set this rate to be modulated by one of the randoms. And that creates like this almost pitched kind of distortion effect. But I'll often, maybe adjust this a little bit, turn the mix down. And we can even modulate this mix with the shape to kind of give it more of a gated. And this phaser is also really, really cool. If we set this feedback almost all the way up to like 86%, that sounded good before. Actually, don't know if these are percentages, but anyway, 86. Turn the flange on. Let's turn the rate down. 24.5. Turn the phase up to like 29.5. And then the mix down. Kind of gives it more of a glassy texture. What we can do is we can also create different shapes to modulate some of these effects. So let's actually turn shape A off. Let's go with shape B for this mix over here. And we can have this on a different kind of time, so let's just go with those. We can set some of these to trigger randomly and some of them to not trigger randomly. So you get like sometimes a regimented gated pattern, sometimes not. And what we can also do to add variation, if that's not already enough variation, we can start mixing in this actual oscillator. And because we've kind of got a different modulation pattern or amount going there, it's going to kind of tune to these different notes, the sort of oscillator and the filter, but it's going to kind of create these chords, which are going to kind of hopefully work each time. Okay, so the pitch is quite low of this. Just get that kind of like tribal bongo style sound out of it. I don't know if you guys can hear that as well from those kind of like quick modulation envelopes and stuff on those effects and those filters. Kind of creates a very percussive sound that sounds very natural and, I don't know, very akin to the kind of Forest style, I think. Awesome. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me know what you think in the comments. A big thanks to IDM Mag, proud supporters of the dance music scene and my channel. So I'm going to be posting these presets to my Patreon for all my $5 supporters. So if you want to know what that's all about, check out the link that's going to be somewhere on the screen right now. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. See you guys next time.